October 17 meeting of the Ann Arbor City Council. If you're able, please rise and join us for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would our clerk please call the roll of council?
Councilmember Hayner?
Down here.
Councilmember Dish?
Present.
Councilmember Griswold?
Here.
Councilmember Song?
Here.
Councilmember Graham?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Mayor Taylor?
Here.
Councilmember Iyer?
Here.
Councilmember Nelson?
Here.
Councilmember Briggs?
Here.
Councilmember Ramlawi? Absent? We have a quorum.
May I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda? Moved by Councilmember Dish, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion of the agenda. All in favor? All opposed? The agenda is approved. Do we have communications today from our city administrator?
No, sir.
We have no introductions today, and so we move straight into public comment reserve time. Public comment reserve time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment reserve time, one needs to have signed up in advance by contacting our city clerk. Speakers, both here and online, will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired, either by the lights or verbally if you're online. When your time has expired in each instance, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Our first speaker today is Jeffrey Harold.
Mayor, I believe Mr. Harold might still be outside at the, so
Fair point.
we'll get him in time.
Jeffrey Harold. Our next speaker is Audrey Anderson. Audrey Anderson. Our next speaker is Edward Sanders. Edward Sanders. Our next speaker is Henry Herskowitz.
Good evening. In 2016, the Snyder administration passed legislation to ensure that a school district social studies curriculum for grades 8 to 12 include age and grade-appropriate instruction about genocide, including the Holocaust and the Armenian genocide. My question to council tonight is, what's being taught Ann Arbor students with our tax dollars? I believe we have a right to know. For example, will the students be required to read the Diary of Anne Frank, written by a number of authors, or this book, Unmasking Anne Frank, her famous diary exposed as a literary fraud, by Ikuo Suzuki? Perhaps both texts will be used, and students allowed to debate the issue based on them. That sounds productive. What is the curriculum for students as teachers comply with the state's guidelines? What titles of books will be used? Will outside speakers be invited to share knowledge with these students? Will a debate be set up between Holocaust experts Deborah Lipstadt and Germar Rudolph to settle claims on both sides? Are there in fact two sides to this debate? Incredibly, some say no. A sculptor friend of mine is creating artwork for a Holocaust museum in Florida. He asked me for some input. I said I wasn't in Europe during World War II, but Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower, and Charles de Gaulle certainly were. Well after the war, these gentlemen penned their memoirs. Churchill wrote The Second World War, Eisenhower, Crusade in Europe, and de Gaulle, Memories of War. These combined writings total over 7,000 pages, but readers will find no mention either of Nazi gas chambers, a genocide of the Jews, or of 6 million Jewish victims of the war. Needless to say, my sculptor friend was shocked. He'd never heard of this fact. Perhaps you might be as well. Here's the source. Tell the Truth and Shame the Devil by Gerard Menuhin, the son of Jewish violinist Yehudi Menuhin. Locally, there's a Facebook group called Arbor Politics. The Holocaust subject came up, and I referred to a short article by Dan McGowan called "What Does Holocaust Denial Really Mean?", which defines the term in some detail. A grad student member of this group told me that prior to Dan's reading Dan's essay, he merely assumed that so-called deniers just eliminated the entire experience of Jews during World War II. He was shocked, but eager to find more, and I hope we all are. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Trisha Duckworth.
Ms. Duckworth, if you're online, please raise your hand. Mayor, I don't see our speaker on the call.
We have a series of speakers having been called. That we are at the end of our speaker list. For speakers who were not here when they were called, is Jeffrey Harold in the room. Mr. Harold, it's your turn to speak.
Thank you, and my apologies for my tardiness to you all. Good evening, council members. I'm Jeff Harold, and I'm the pastor of New Beginnings Community Church of Washtenaw County and a resident of Ann Arbor. My faith work leads me to work on racial and social justice issues, including with the Washtenaw Regional Organizing Coalition, or WeRock, a coalition of faith, labor, community organizations, and individuals that build healthy collective power needed to break down the systems that sustain injustice and economic inequality. Another organization I'm active with is called Moses Action. And one of Moses Action's core value goals is to promote increased voter participation among people of color, low-income individuals, and historically marginalized groups. The core goal is what led us to be a founding member of the coalition called Defend Black Voters. In 2020, Black, brown, and working class people across the country showed up to the polls in force, and now we are facing a reaction. A thinly veiled ploy that uses the big lie as an excuse to pass restrictions to make it harder for us to vote. That ploy is called Secure My Vote, and this effort could be passed into law by the end of the year. The stakes for my community couldn't be higher. I can't sit idly by while there are efforts to silence the voices in my community. Elements of Secure My Vote, like doing away with automatic absentee ballots, would adversely affect the seniors in my congregation. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Delta Dental of Michigan have been using our taxpayer dollars through their contracts with the city of Ann Arbor to bankroll the legislators behind this effort. Vendors doing business with the city should align their own publicly stated positions on racial justice and internal policies on diversity, equity, and inclusion with their political advocacy and spending. At this critical moment, we are asking council members to take a bold stand as an important vote in our community to hold these corporations accountable to protect our civil rights. Thank you for the opportunity to address council on matters important to us.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Audrey Anderson.
Good evening, Council. I'm Audrey Anderson. I'm a proud member, leader of the Michigan People's Campaign. As a retired healthcare worker here in Washtenaw County, I was actually a public health nurse for the Washtenaw County Health Department. I've served countless Ann Arbor and Washtenaw County residents. including seniors and low-income families struggling to get by, struggling to overcome the social determinants that they face. I know countless folks like the patients I served need the support to make it to the polls and receive their absentee ballot. The architects of voter suppression legislation know very well that when barriers are raised to voting, it will disproportionately silence the voices of the people that I served, including my own voice. The extremist lawmakers trying to silence our voices know that Black and low-income Michiganders want change, and that's what makes them fearful of us. That's why they're trying to silence us. We want an economy that works for 99%, not the 1%. We want a just and equitable society. And those that profit from this system are doing whatever it takes to stop our voices from being heard. That is why they still use the big lie as an excuse to pass voter restrictions that just so happen to disproportionately impact Black and low-income Michiganders. Investigation after investigation, including those led by Republicans, have proven that 2020 was the most secure election on record. Yet they insist they need to pass these measures because of voter fraud. I say to them, you're not fooling anyone. I was 13 years old in 1965 when I saw Bloody Sunday. I hear the beep. And 5 years later, at 18 years old, I was able to vote. And consistently, every year after that, and when it was time to vote, I voted. I don't want them, and they can't have my vote. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to us.
Our next speaker is Edward Sanders.
What was that name you called?
Edward Sanders.
And that would be, where would you like me to stand? Here at the podium?
3 minutes up front, sir.
Thank you. And good evening. Is there a certain amount of time I have?
3 minutes, sir.
3 minutes, okay. I want to take, and I know everybody is making statements in regards to certain healthcare providers. As a social worker, I would like to take and ask those who are have our concern about our health, if we would imagine democracy to be one of the things that we consider to be determinative of health. You know, our participation in a democratic process and where we take and have some say in our well-being. And in doing that, I would suggest, as opposed to taking and giving money to people who already have money or giving money to people who have power, let's imagine if we done that with people that was least represented in our society, those who are coming home from our prisons. Wonder if we took and provided them transportation to the Secretary of State's office and had them not only to get their ID, but to register to vote and then head down to the Department of Human Health and Service, where they can take and begin to take and sign up for Medicaid. They can take and sign up for a primary health care provider. And these are things that will keep Michigan healthy. These are ideas that don't just take and attack each other. These are ideas that say, let's come together and let's do something that actually affect our democracy. Most of the men and women in our prisons in the United States, not just Michigan, between 94 and 97% of them went to prison as a result of copping out of what was claimed to be the most democratic system in America, and that's the jury system. They didn't take and go through a jury. They went through guilty pleas. Wonder if we really gave them democracy when they came out, if we gave them an opportunity to participate in our democratic process, instead of calling them in a generic way returning citizens, we make them returning citizens by giving them an opportunity to experience real responsibility and participating in a democratic process, electing state officials, etc. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Trisha Duckworth.
Good evening, everyone. Just here today to stand with the coalition to ask you all to just lean in a little further to the work. We are here about defending the black vote. It's sad that in 2022, we have to even be talking about defending the black vote, right? It's a conversation that we shouldn't be having, but we're here to have it. And we are grateful for those of you who understand this conversation and the importance of it and the continuation of the work. But we're asking everyone to just press in a little further. Black folks are suffering, you know, in communities that we're serving, the continuation of the suffering. And to think about losing the vote, that's the only thing that we have. That's our power. There's two forms of power that I told folks the other day. It's the money, right? We know money is the power, but our vote, our collective vote together, we can promote change. And we're asking you all to lean in with us even further and continue the work to defend the black vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there communications today from council? Councilmember Song.
I'd like to encourage folks to attend the Washtenaw Housing Alliance's State of Homelessness and Affordable Housing event on November 15th. Registration is open. It'll be featuring my friend Abdul El Sayed as the keynote speaker, so it should be an interesting time, and also a fundraiser to support supportive services, housing supportive services. Also note that the county on November 2nd will be voting for additional allocations for supportive services, and I'm really excited about this as it gets colder. Ann Arbor's done its part in allocating ARPA funding for this. I'm very hopeful that the county will discuss and pass a resolution so that their ARPA money, their federal recovery relief funding, will also go towards our housing supportive services. And hopefully that's a multi-year funding effort. So many thanks to County Commissioner Andy Labar, Justin Hodge, Katie Scott, and more for really pushing for this for the past year and a half.
Further communication, Councilmember Griswold.
First, I'd like to acknowledge the coverage that Channel 7 gave a week ago for the growing dioxane plume, and acknowledge that the EPA has consultants at the site now taking samples. And one of the slogans that was used in the coverage was remediation, not litigation. We need to start the remediation as soon as possible. Secondly, I was in New York yesterday for my birthday to see my new grandson, but my son-in-law insisted that he take me to Hoboken, New Jersey for a tour, because Hoboken is known as the model city in North America for Vision Zero. They have not had a traffic fatality since 2018. And one of their principles is something called daylighting intersections. And what they've done is they've built out and provided more cement, as we do at intersections, so it shortens the crosswalks. But they also do something that we don't do, and that is create adequate sight distance at the intersection so the pedestrians are visible to the drivers and the drivers are visible, and, you know, everyone can see each other. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. It's critically important. And the other thing they do is they put diagonal striping at intersections so that for 20 feet before the crosswalk, cars cannot park, and that is strictly enforced. Michigan has that state law, but we don't enforce it as aggressively, and it's very important. And there are many lessons to learn from looking at Hoboken, and I hope that our transportation department does that. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was sent a copy of suggestions to rules changes that are bouncing around somewhere internally here at City Council, and it was like a red line copy. And it's nice to see so many people here to speak, to have public hearings, and I love listening to the community. I like to take notes about what people say, so especially a lot of kind of interesting turns of phrases and kind of genuine, kind of truthful thoughts or whatever come out when people come out here to speak. So I really love it. And but I was disturbed to see in this red line set of rules changes that it's apparently being proposed that the time that was taken away from council members to speak over the last 2 years is being given back to the new body. And there's going to be major restrictions and possible changes on the public comment aspects. And the copy that I saw showed doing away with public comment at the end of the meeting, so you won't have a chance to say, hey, what did you guys just do? What are you doing to us here? And react to what happened that night. And I also saw a slight expansion of the 15 at the front, but through what seemed to me to be a strange and convoluted process to get those slots that you all just used. And I also saw a time limit proposed on other public hearings of 45 minutes. And so if there's 3 minutes to speak, that's basically 15 people. Or it might be done like the school board does, where if they have half an hour and 30 people show up, everybody gets a minute. Because some of those changes rub very dangerously close to violations of the Open Meetings Act and other kind of traditions we've had here in this chamber. And so I just wanted to mention it, and keep folks who come down here to speak publicly should keep an eye on what's happening and make sure that we've already gotten rid of a bunch of opportunities for public comment around planning here in our city. And so I would hate to see it happen around other matters too.
Councilmember Radina.
Thank you, Mayor. If and when those rule changes come to council, I look forward to having kind of a discussion about them. I think, unfortunately, we just heard a lot of mischaracterizations about what's in them. We had quite a discussion at the administration committee, and so at no point will anyone be cut off from speaking. It allows for continued public comment.
Publishing.
One of the, I questioned whether or not I was going to address this, but I think, unfortunately, I have to say something. We heard from one of our public speakers tonight. While I'm not sure that this is the right body to talk about curriculum in our public schools, I just want to indicate there are not two sides to genocide. There are not two sides to the Holocaust. There were at least 11 million victims of the Holocaust, including 6 million Jews, tens of thousands of LGBTQ people. And I just think it's incredibly disappointing that we continue to see this slog towards anti-Semitism here in this body. Thanks.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thanks. I just want to correct the record on a few mischaracterizations of the rules changes that will be coming. This is an expansion of public comment. It makes it easier for people to get on the list to comment and to not have to wait around all evening to address this body on an issue that is not on the agenda right now. If there's a general issue you want to bring to council, you have to wait until the very end. So this allows for expanding public comment at the beginning of the meeting so that people who want to address both an issue on the agenda or just a general matter can do so without having to wait around all evening. It also restores the 3 minutes for the council members at the beginning, partially because it does remove the council member comment at the end. There are no changes to public hearings, as was stated incorrectly. So it's disappointing to see these changes mischaracterized. If the council member had a question, he could very well have raised it with any one of us on the administration committee. instead of using this body to promote misinformation that, once again, aims to sow seeds of distrust in our community.
I'd like to use our granted personal, I'd like to interrupt there because she's mischaracterizing my words. I'm only telling you what I read. I'm only telling you what I read.
This is not,
Publish it. Let the public decide.
Councilmember? Councilmember Grand.
Thank you. I won't belabor the points about the admin committee. I think they've been covered well, other than to say that we also had some excellent input and assistance from our attorney's office, and so thank you to Ms. Coward and Mr. McDonald for that. I think what will be coming forward is intended to make things better and to make things easier for the public to participate at the beginning of the meeting, which many of us feel is more democratic. I would like to encourage community members, with the election coming up, there's lots of great information sessions out there, programs around voting, around different ballot initiatives. So if you're still undecided about any of those things or want information, there's lots of information abounds, and just wanted to recognize our clerk's office, especially for what's happening on campus. It's a beautiful thing, and it makes, I always like going to the polls on election day, but to maybe be able to go up to campus and have a button that says vote due 2022 is just maybe too good of an opportunity to pass up. So, but they're beautiful spaces. They're spaces that are, that where we see the intersection of art and democracy and engagement and getting lots of young people involved in local, state, and national politics, and that's just a wonderful thing. So kudos to our clerk's office for an expansion of what already was an incredibly successful program.
Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, my comments are a continuation of praise for our city clerk's office. I wanted to say kudos to Ms. Beaudry and the staff there for the partnership that they've been doing with the U of M Museum of Art. For folks, there are now, and their efforts to increase ease of participation and access to voting in our community. We now have 2 on-campus locations to vote at the U of M Art Museum and then at the Duderstadt Center as well. And my understanding is that there's a wonderful public art installation at Duderstadt, if I'm as well, so I encourage folks to go check that out. I still need to see it. And there was a wonderful event on Friday around voting and politics and policy. So thanks for all that participation. And also, well, I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Further communication from council? I'd like to request confirmation of the following appointments that were presented for consideration at the regular session of October 3rd, 2022 to the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority, Chris Allen to the Downtown Development Authority, Theresa Nicholas, Stephen Brummer, Danielle Vaughn. May I have a motion, please? Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? They are approved. I'd also like to recommend the following appointments for your consideration to the Housing Human Services Advisory Board, James Dowling and James Daniel, to the Human Rights Commission, Sarah Peitzmeyer, and to the Human Rights Commission, Brandon Bond. I had the pleasure of being in Washington, D.C. Last week in connection with the White House's Communities in Action program, an opportunity for the White House to engage a number of elected officials and nonprofit and other leaders in Michigan as to work that had been done in Michigan resulting from the American Rescue Plan, the Inflation Relief Act, and of course to the ARPA, the infrastructure bill, rather. In any event, it was exciting to have an opportunity to talk with administration officials, including Ann Arborite Gene Sperling and Michigander Jennifer Granholm, Secretary Granholm, about the good things that are going on here in Michigan, and with particularity the things that are going on in Ann Arbor, and further, the things that the infrastructure and energy and other recreational projects that would be suitable for future federal engagement that could increase the good stories that we have, increase the good successes that we have from our cooperation with our federal officials on work that we're doing here in Ann Arbor. And so that's something that occurred, and I just wanted to read that out. May I have a motion, please, to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion of the consent agenda. Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, I would like to pull CA 14 and also just make a quick comment around CA 5, which is the resolution to approve the purchase of the 302 Mulholland Avenue, which I support, but just wanted to make a note that that parcel has been used kind of for an innovative urban flower farm and artist residency program previously. And while those folks have moved off, I just wanted to mention to staff that I am getting messages from community members that might want to partner for a project moving forward. And so, if a critical mass is reached, I'll certainly reach out to staff to see if there might be some way that we might be able to continue some sort of demonstration urban garden at that point.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks. Just, if I may just make a remark on a couple, there's no need to pull this off, but on CA5, I think that's an example of where 8 votes are, so you'll see on the agenda, it says 8 votes are required, and that's because it's out of budget expense. We didn't budget for this, but in this case, it's wholly appropriate to ask for 8 votes and to take this action out of the budget cycle because an opportunity, an opportunity arises sometimes to purchase a property or something changes. This property is, and we're using stormwater fund funds because we're trying to get rid of properties that sit in the harm's way from flooding, and there's some hope that the tree line would take care of some of that maybe. But at the same, on the other hand, we are allowing all kinds of things with FEMA map provisions and stuff to exist basically in the historical center line of the Huron River, and so it's kind of an odd toss-up here. But this is a case where 8 votes to vote for something out of budget is a problem. But whenever you see that on the consent agenda, it means that we didn't budget for it, and there's all kinds of them on there all the time. And these are all add on to our $550 million annual budget right now. So we spend over $1.1 billion every 2 years to run your city. And, we're a small part of your tax dollar. So a lot of money flows through this community. And so any excuses that we have to not do the right things socially and morally should fall on deaf ears. We spend a lot of money here in Ann Arbor. Thank you.
Further discussion of the consent agenda? All in favor of the consent agenda? All opposed? The consent agenda is approved with 10 council members present, all voting in the affirmative, thus satisfying the 8-vote requirement with respect to CA3, CA5, CA7, CA8, CA9, CA10, CA14, resolution to authorize an agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Optimum RX for pharmacy benefit management services effective January 1, 2023 in the amount of $8,964,668. Moved by Councilmember Briggs, seconded by Councilmember Iyer. Discussion, please, of CA14. Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, I'd like to thank all of the activists that are in the room this evening and that were rallying outside of City Hall earlier tonight, bringing attention to the corporate practices of companies like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan and Delta Dental and a number of others. We are seeing really egregious behavior from these Michigan corporations. They're the biggest funder of extremist politicians. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan is the biggest funder of extremist politicians in Michigan, funding voter suppression efforts. And it is disappointing to see, to know that when we approve, if we approve this contract, that Blue Cross Blue Shield can then use these funds to then continue to support extremist politicians and move forward legislation in Michigan that we have unanimously at this body suggested earlier last year that we did not support. We have later on the agenda DC2 that will talk about how we can change this moving forward, but I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to discuss this this contract at a little more length tonight.
Further discussion? Councilor Ryer.
I have much to say, but I think I'll save it for the resolution. I'm just really disappointed that to be taking this vote tonight. It feels wrong. I wish we had a different option, but we don't at this time anyway. And our employees need their benefits, and that's important. But the actions of Blue Cross, I will address when we get to the resolution later in the agenda.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you. You may have heard the foreshadowing that there's a resolution that's going to supposedly deal with this type of thing. We speak as a body, and I don't always agree with what we say. And some of the, it's disappointing to have to say this, but it's the fact. These are the facts, and we have to rule with facts that in the United States, corporations are people, and I'm also sad to report that political donations are considered free speech. And at the very least, they're considered speech. And so, as doing the business of running a city, which is really what we're here for first, in my opinion, sometimes you come up against this, and there's all kinds of ways to address it. We could ask for our Viva Trust and our boards who do our retirement planning to divest from fossil fuel corporations, as an example. And we failed to do that in the past. Mostly because of the cost, if I recall the conversation. So there's ways to address this that aren't pushing in to the fine line between speech, protected speech, free speech, corporate procurement practices, because we are a corporation, and procurement practices as are handed down by federal, state governments for municipalities to deal with funds that are mixed or commingled funds. So, I'm going to vote for this. I don't know what to say. Like, people tell me, hey, when you go buy materials, do you go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or Menards? Because one's bad, and one's bad, and one's bad, and they all have NASCAR teams. Where am I supposed to, buy materials for my work? So, we're treading on some seriously interesting conversations here, so I'm looking forward to them.
Further discussion? I'm going to be voting in favor of the resolution, although I share the sentiments of my colleagues. As folks may know, the chair, the president of Blue Cross Blue Shield, signed an April 21 statement, which included in part assertions that government must avoid actions that reduce participation in elections, particularly among historically disenfranchised communities, persons with disabilities, older adults, racial minorities, and low-income voters. Government has a responsibility to continually improve and strengthen election administration because public faith in the security and integrity of our elections is fundamental. These public statements put the chair on the side of inclusion, equity, and democracy, and this is where I believe we all ought to be. The support of big lie, disenfranchising electors is, I believe, inconsistent with the promotion of American democracy and inconsistent with the values expressed in that April 21 communication. As I think we'll get on into DC 2, that inconsistency is troubling. We have values, we state them, and then we take actions. And the consistency of our values with our actions is important. As I'll go on to say in our on that next resolution, it builds confidence, it builds trust. And when there is an asymmetry, when there's a disconnect between values and actions, it breaks trust, it breaks confidence. Here, I believe we have an instance of a vendor that is breaking that trust by supporting extremist politicians, making statements in support of democracy, and then supporting those who do not. That's inconsistent, I believe, with proper action. It's inconsistent with the values that are stated, and it is it's incredibly disappointing. Here, we need to provide our amazing staff with the values upon which they've come to rely, and we'll be going forward in doing that, absolutely. But we will also be looking, I think, I'm hoping, to learn better over time how our vendors are acting in a manner that is consistent with their values. That is an important consideration. I think it's important information for us to have, and perhaps it is information we'll be able to ascertain moving forward. Further discussion. Councilmember Briggs.
Sorry. I also pulled up the June 2020 pledge that Blue Cross Blue Shield made, a pledge to make a meaningful change. And as we're about to approve this and become quite a significant customer for them this coming year, I'd like to call out what they have pledged to do, which is to make meaningful change, but they pledge to act first and foremost, to take tangible steps to stop injustices in our communities and remove barriers preventing equitable health, well-being, and safety for all. We pledge to listen and learn. We pledge to create and maintain a forum for our associates to speak. We pledge to make our voices and our actions known both inside and outside our company, in voicing our contempt against racism, hate, discrimination, and violence. We pledge to be part of a change that we wish to see. And finally, we pledge to not let the things ever go back to the way that they were. So tonight, I would call on them to live up to this pledge as one of their customers. They have made this pledge.
Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? It's approved. There are no public hearings today. My apologies, Councilmember Griswold, my apologies. Let's roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
No.
Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Grant?
Yes.
Councilmember Medina?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Iyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Malawi, absent. Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Motion carries.
There are no public hearings today. We have before us the regular session meeting minutes of October 3, 2022. May I have a motion, please, to approve these minutes? Moved by Councilmember Iyer, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion of the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? The minutes are approved. DC1, resolution to approve change order number 2 with Grace Construction Company, Inc. for the 2022 Bandamere Park Bridge Repairs and Renovations Project. Moved by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Dish. Discussion, please, of DC1. All in favor? Opposed? It is approved. DC2, resolution regarding consistency of corporate expression of values and corporate action. Moved by Councilmember Iyer, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion, please, of DC2. Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. And thank you to all the activists who are here tonight and who rallied out front before our meeting. I was honored to join you and to stand with you in the coalition to defend Black voters in Michigan. Here in Ann Arbor, racial equity and voter access are two values that we hold dear. These are long-held values in our city, and even just in the past couple of years that I've been on council, we have taken steps forward. We've passed the Crown Act. We've hired our first ever DEI director for the city. We have supported no reason absentee voting and early voting. We made Juneteenth a city holiday, and we opposed this measure as a body. We voted to oppose this measure that is now going forward, called the so-called Support My Vote, which is really thinly veiled voter suppression. It is critical that our tax dollars here in Ann Arbor, because we have these values, do not go funneled through corporations to fund voter suppression and to fund legislation that results in further racial inequity in our state. I thought Blue Cross Blue Shield shared our values. It's been referenced that the CEO, Dan Lepp, signed a letter in 2021 with other CEOs speaking out against this exact type of legislation that is now being funded with their dollars. What is that? It's a gut punch to know that our tax dollars are being used in this manner because they are receiving millions. We just approved almost 9 million more going to Blue Cross. And when our mayor reached out and tried to open a dialogue with the CEO, Dan Lepp, he got the stiff arm. So tonight, I want to call on Blue Cross, I want to call on Delta Dental to start practicing what they preach. Their words are empty until they back them up with action. And that action right now means that they need to tell these extremist, voter-suppressing legislators, these big lie promoters, that they've crossed a line.
Councilmember.
And they shouldn't get any funding until they stop it.
Councilmember Dish.
I want to thank the activists of Defend Black Voters Coalition who are with us in this room, and those who are not, actually, too, for all the research you've done to daylight the hypocritical advocacy of Blue Cross Blue Shield. It takes a lot of work to do that kind of analysis, and that you took the time to do that work puts powerful facts in our hand and in yours to daylight just how inconsistent BCBS is. That's an interesting acronym for them. Emphasis on the BS. I don't know how you can affirm, as Blue Cross Blue Shield did publicly in April 2021, and the mayor mentioned earlier, that public faith in the security and integrity of our elections is fundamental, and then go on to donate tens of thousands of dollars to 4 state lawmakers who tried to enter the state capitol building so that a group of Republicans could cast a ballot for fake electors who would vote for the previous holder of the office. Those fake electors are now under federal investigation. So what is Blue Cross Blue Shield doing, mixing our taxpayer money with those people? And thank you for finding out that fact, because you are right that money is power, but you are also right that the vote of the organized people is power, and so are facts. And I thank you very much for the work that you've done to bring them to light.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you. So when I read this resolution, there's 2 resolve clauses at the end, and one is, I will sum up the take from reading this, that the first one is that we're calling on these corporations, when they say one thing, to act that way. They say one thing, when they do another, that's not what we're looking for from anybody. And so I essentially see that first resolve clause as a call to end the, various hypocrisies that exist in our society and community and boards and businesses and everywhere else. And the second one is asking the city administrator to report to City Council on the feasibility of including in our procurement policies an evaluation of whether potential vendors' political activities are being put forth in a hypocritical way. So are they saying one thing and doing another? And, again, as I said earlier, I think that's a fine line we're walking on. Surely the irony is not lost on this room full of intelligent and activist folks that everyone said how we have to act to make changes. We have to have direct action. We have to seize the opportunities that are before us to shut these kinds of things down. And yet when we went around the table, everybody voted for the Blue Cross Blue Shield contract. We could have said no to that. I said no to it. Councilwoman Griswold said no to it. That's hypocrisy. Right here at the table. And I'm sorry, but it is. That's my view. Say no. Mean it. Mean what you say. Say no, send that contract back, find somebody else. If you're not doing that, what are we doing here? What is that to do that? I'm sorry. I don't disagree with this sea of whereas statements on this. I'm going to think about it because I don't know that our procurement, I'm concerned about previous changes we made to our procurement that clearly are advantaging one group of vendors over another. And that's what's going to happen here too. And I think that's rubbing very close to despite our legal team's assurances, apparently, that's rubbing very close to what's allowed under state and federal procurement laws. And, you know, if that's where Ann Arbor wants to stand up and put our legal team to work to defend our right to do that, then we'll pass this, and that's what'll happen in the future. And that's, you know, that's fine, and that's certainly our right to do that. And, you know, we'll see if we're going to seize this moment to make those changes. So I'll reserve my time if I speak again.
Councilmember Briggs.
Yes, so it's easy to do grandstanding when you know 10 other folks are going to vote a certain way. But the reality is we have procurement policies and processes that we have to follow. And the question is, what are we going to do moving forward? I think that this is a challenge. It's a challenging issue. I really appreciate Defend Black Voters Coalition coming to us with this and pushing us to do more. And we've been doing work in this community. We've shifted our procurement policies from lowest price to best value, and we're working to align how the bids that we approve with the values of our community. And the question that I have for our city administrator and staff moving forward is what are the other changes, what other pieces can we incorporate into our procurement policies so that we can at least daylight what is going on? And that's what's being asked for here. It is, you can imagine how many vendors the city works with on a regular basis. And so going through the exercise of doing this with every single vendor could be very challenging, right? To align whether or not their political spending is in line with their values. And so we need to find a way that we can do this in a way that's doesn't become a full-time job for 20 people in the organization, but is actually something that moves our city forward and our community forward in terms of how we align our the contracts that we're approving. So I know this is not an easy task that we're putting on our city administrator's desk or our procurement office or our city attorneys, but I hope that they'll come back, and I hope that they'll work with the coalition to find maybe perhaps a model approach to this that could work for other communities across the state that are interested in doing this. So I look forward to seeing what they bring back to us and you know, looking for opportunities to move this forward in some capacity.
Councilor Breyer.
Thank you. Grandstanding is right. This council member on the end took a symbolic vote, knowing that the rest of us would carry it. But I would note that
personal privilege under our rules.
But I note that the
On what grounds?
That our rules state clearly that you're not supposed to characterize another council member's comments, and that's all that's happening here tonight. I'm grandstanding, I'm this, I'm that. Please, Mr. Mayor, enforce our body's rules.
But I would note that this same council member voted against our best value procurement policy that aligns our values with our procurement and allows us to make decisions exactly like we're talking about right now. So that's what matters. Again, words are words. Actions and votes are what matters. And I'm really pleased that the majority of this body supported the best value contracting policy. And if there's a proposal that's brought forth to us that from our attorneys and our city administrator that will allow us to incorporate this political activity component, I feel strongly that we will support that as well, because we have already proven that we want to align our values with how we spend our tax dollars. I want to make one further point about what we're talking about here. This is not a partisan issue. This idea of election denialism it's core to our democracy. And we should all, Republicans and Democrats of goodwill, be speaking out against this. So when Blue Cross says, well, we have to donate to Republicans so we can get legislation passed, that's bull. they can say, there's a line in the sand here, and it's going to take corporations, big money
Councilmember.
to draw that line in the sand.
Councilmember Grand.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the co-sponsors and the activists for being here today for all of their hard work. When this came forward, it was actually surprising to me that Blue Cross Blue Shield can even make political donations, because if you look at their history as being a not-for-profit organization, that when hospitals became places that one didn't go to die, but actually to get better, it was established so that workers and the first beneficiaries of a Blue Shield plan were actually teachers in Texas who wanted to be able to afford hospital care. And so if we look at the origins of this company, it was one that in Michigan was the first place the first organization to help with Medicare. If you look at what they say their values are for, that when they're making donations to other groups, it's supposed to be to make the community healthier. That's their intent. And if you look on their website, they say that Blue Cross and Blue Shield put people before profits, just like they did in the past. So this is incredibly important, I think, just to daylight what they say their values are, to try to do the best within our means, to make sure that we're holding corporations accountable for what they say they do. And that's really what this is about. It's not about taking health care away from our hardworking employees. But it's, and even though I'll be leaving this council, I feel so good about where it's heading, because I know there's a group of council members here that have improved the processes we have and care very deeply about how that moves forward and how we can expand on making sure that we're using our money that aligns with our values. So thanks to all the co-sponsors again.
Councilmember Hayner.
Yeah, thank you. In my opinion, the best values contracting rules were an attempt to create a vague set of standards that rigged the process for union bidders, and I think that I've made my points on that earlier. And this one creates a vague set of guidelines that may weed out vendors based on speech. And the first resolve clause asks corporations to modify either their speech or their actions, and that's all fine. And the second one creates a set of vague guidelines for awarding contracts based on speech. And I suppose if we want to go down that road, we're going to. It's certainly not grandstanding to point out that when someone says one thing with great emphasis and then passes repeatedly on opportunities to actually put that into action, I don't know, if that's grandstanding, I'm all for it. If it takes big money to draw a line in the sand, we just missed an opportunity to have a headline tomorrow that says Ann Arbor City Council rejects a $9 million contract over corporate values. And if it's grandstanding to point that out, that words mean more than action at this table, I'll keep doing it, because I've been doing it for 4 years here. And I appreciate these folks who come in here and they mean what they're saying here. And we passed on an opportunity to have a headline like that. And for all the PR people sitting at this table, that's shocking to me. Ann Arbor rejects $9 million contract. Does anybody who voted for it want to bring it back for reconsideration? Or do we just want to put talking points on your next political campaign brochure? And I'm not going to. I'm sorry to the folks who are here who believe this is the right thing, because I believe it's right at its spirit, but I don't believe it's a proper way to apply. I don't think we should be creating vague rule sets for vendors with the public money. I just have a problem with that. Somebody has to be a budget hawk on this body, and I'll take that responsibility, and I'll defend that responsibility.
Councilmember Radina.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to continue to echo the thanks for the community leaders and activists who are here tonight and who brought this forward. I also want to apologize that in 2022, you still have to stand in the cold and rally for your right to vote. This shouldn't continue to be happening. As others have mentioned, this rallying by extremist politicians around efforts to deny voters the franchise or to make it harder for them to cast their ballots simply for political gain and for electoral advantage is disgusting. It's undemocratic, and it needs to stop. And you know, I applaud the sponsors for bringing a resolution forward to looking forward on how we can continue to be part of the solution and to continue to hold some of these corporations accountable that are saying one thing and then contributing to the very elected officials that are contributing to the problem, and not just, frankly, bad policy that would attack voters, but through a bad process, a process that usurps the voters by exploiting a constitutional loophole to avoid the governor's veto, to deny the opportunity for voters to weigh in by submitting these petitions and then asking a minority of voters to submit petitions to a legislature that can implement an unpopular proposal. So I am sorry that we are having this conversation, but I am grateful that we are looking forward as to how we can continue to uphold our values here in our community and continue to hold some of our corporate vendors accountable. And I would ask that I be added as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Councilmember Dish.
I would like to be added as a co-sponsor too, and I would like to ask our city administrator if he could say a few words explaining the difficult position we were in having to confront this contract on the consent agenda with nothing currently in our procurement rules giving us a ground to vote against it.
The employees and the retirees of the city of Ann Arbor already get their medical claims coverage under Blue Cross Blue Shield. What you voted on tonight allows for the script portion to fold under the same contract when we looked at price hikes that are going to take place. We're trying to do things to keep costs to a minimum to the employees. This contract kicks in January 1. So if you would have voted no tonight, we would not have had time to do something else and be ready to roll by January 1st. And I make no comments on your vote, but just from a management standpoint, we couldn't. We had one vendor, this is it. Employees have to have the ability to get their medicine. They do. So.
Councilor Griswold.
Did this resolution come from the Human Rights Commission?
It did not.
Was it reviewed by the Human Rights Commission?
It was not.
Okay. And just regarding the comment that the city administrator made, we don't have time to do something else, but we might have time to make a stand and get that headline, as we've done with some developers. We've said no, and then we've negotiated and come back. So sometimes there are alternatives. I will not be voting for this tonight. I want to thank all the activists. I agree with the vision. I worked long and hard for many, many years when I was on the school board and before for a third comprehensive high school, because it would add the ability for a quality education for everyone. And it was, my main goal was equity. And prior to that high school, we actually staffed based on a number of students dropping out after 10th grade, and that was wrong. So I believe I have a track record of a commitment to equity, but I don't see this as going through the right process. I believe that it needs to go back to the Human Rights Commission. I believe that our organization, the City of Ann Arbor, does not have performance evaluations, it does not have metrics, it does not have all of the pieces in place to have a process that would accomplish this. And there would be many unintended consequences, and possibly it would be more of a pay-to-play in terms of who would be making these statements in order to get contracts. And lastly, we have a huge amount of money involved in local politics in Ann Arbor. We have many PACs with unknown amount, thousands of dollars involved. Ann Arbor is an area where people want to come and live, they want to come and develop, and there's much money to be made, and that has an influence. So I would like to refer this back to the Human Rights Commission. And if my time is up, I'll take my second time.
Is that a motion to refer it back to committee?
Motion to refer it to committee.
Is there a second on that? There is a second by Councilor Hayner. Discussion on the motion to refer back to Human Rights Commission. I'll just say, for my part, I'm going to decline that opportunity. Although it is, I think, I don't think it speaks to an enforcement of city's non-discrimination ordinance. I think the resolution relates to the city's engagement for its procurement practices, which is outside that scope. Further discussion on the referral back, Councilmember Nelson, then Hayner.
I understand the thought behind referring it, but I also understand the need to have this passed and approved tonight because this vote is coming up in November, and it's really important that there are lots of opportunities for bodies like ours to make public statements around it. I would point out, and I spoke to organizers behind this resolution about this issue. When this resolution was considered by the Wayne County Commission, they did identify a weakness in terms of framing it around hypocrisy. I mean, that really does feel like the foundation of this. Corporations that have professed values and are clearly acting against those values that they are claiming. When the Wayne County Commission discussed this, they pointed out that there are some companies that don't even pretend to posture ideals around protecting the vote or democracy or making sure that everyone is protected in our democracy. I am wondering if we could possibly split off the last resolve clause and have that perhaps discussed at the Human Rights Commission, because I have seen legal questions like that discussed very intelligently at the Human Rights Commission. I'm speaking specifically about the second resolve clause. The first resolve clause, the only weakness I see there is that we keep referring to self-professed values without specific, and referring back to whereas clauses as opposed to identifying them directly in that resolve clause. The second resolved clause, I think that's more of a serious discussion, and that piece of it probably could find a home for discussion at the Human Rights Commission. But I'm not going to support referring the whole of it back to the Human Rights Commission.
Councilor Hayner.
Well, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I seconded that as a, you might call it like a table courtesy, because I like to hear the conversations around these topics. And I agree with Councilwoman Nelson from the Human Rights Commission just said about that I'd certainly like to hear what they have to say. And they've put forward some pretty great things over the years, and we failed to act on many of them, unfortunately. And I have said in the past, and I still believe that in some cases that referrals to committees is where well-meaning ideas go to die, but not always. So again, once again, I'm on the fence for something. I would like to hear what people say about that. I don't want to do this to us, but because of when this came on the agenda, I didn't really, I'm not going to ask for a closed session to discuss this, but I believe that it would be warranted, that creating procurement rules are a dicey proposition. And I guess I'm not going to support this referral, but I certainly would love to hear what HRC has to say about it, and I would love to hear that conversation. Councilwoman Nelson, perhaps it could be on the agenda. And of course, these things can be modified in the future, if we choose to. So I don't know. I just wanted to comment like that. Thank you.
Further discussion of the referral? Councilor Griswold.
May I withdraw the referral?
It's now the bodies, it's not the movers. Roll call vote, please, on the referral. Starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Rodina?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Iyer?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
No.
Councilmember Briggs?
No.
Councilmember Ramlawi, absent. Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Dish?
No.
Motion fails.
Further discussion of the main motion? Councilmember Song.
So since 2013, there have been deliberate and successful attempts to gut the Voting Rights Act, then again in 2021. Since 2021, 18 states have passed 34 laws that have somehow restricted access to voting, and according to an ongoing review by the Brennan Center, these laws will affect voters of color more than the general population. And they're clearly aimed at black voters, such as restrictions on Sunday voting. Just last week, the Supreme Court looked to upend Section 2, the Section 2 protection against vote dilution, or making votes meaningless with a case out of Alabama concerning the state's congressional map. Here in Michigan, in 2018, I served on the executive committee of Promote the Vote, a successful ballot to increase voter access to absentee ballots for any reason, and allowing folks to register to vote on Election Day, and giving voters the option to select a straight party option. This effort proved invaluable during the pandemic, increasing the access to the vote. This year, next month, we have a constitutional amendment here in Michigan, again for Promote the Vote, Proposal 2, and that seeks to expand on those rights to preempt efforts to enact stricter voter ID laws and interfere with the certification of future elections. And that's the real danger as we see the 2020 election deniers running for office here in Michigan. We have an opportunity to enshrine voting rights in our state constitution and stand out as a state that supports equitable access to direct democracy. So your presence today, your voices coming to the podium, standing outside in the cold of City Hall tells me that you do not want our tax dollars to fund extremist political action against all this work that we've been working on since 2018. Against this work to protect and fight for voter rights. We are not Alabama. So what I hear from you is that we need to act now because we've already lost so much. So thank you.
Further discussion? Councilor Griswold.
I'd like to offer an amendment that we strike the second resolve clause and refer that to the Human Rights Commission along with working with the city administration.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Nelson. Discussion of the amendment. Councilmember Griswold.
One of the things that troubles me is that we have many whereas clauses that we have to agree with, and we have many values and goals that we're in agreement with. But I don't think that the second resolve clause does anything to support the ballot initiatives on November 8th. I think that is separate, and I think that we can make a strong statement with the first resolve clause while getting our house in order and ensuring that what is done within city administration is done correctly and done in coordination with our city administrator. So we're just we're directing him to do something, and I believe that that needs to be done with his cooperation and the Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
Councilmember Grand.
Thank you. I won't be supporting this amendment. I think it's important not only to think about what's happening in the upcoming election, but how we move forward as a city. I also, if the Human Rights Commission wants to weigh in and be part of the process, that's why we have 2 council liaisons to the Human Rights Commission. So there's nothing to stop those liaisons from going to the next HRC meeting, talking about this action at council, talking, offering if there's any interest in being involved in weighing in on that process. Sometimes we're able to go to commissions first, sometimes things are timely and we have to act and circle back. Also, just for the public, the only things that are binding in a resolution are the resolve clauses, so we don't actually have to agree on the whereas clauses. It's nice when that happens, but when we're really voting on the substance of the resolution, it's on the resolve clauses.
Yeah, Councilor Nelson, Councilor Nelson.
Thank you. This resolution was interesting to me when I first read it, because it really is rooted in hypocrisy, and we had that kind of hypocrisy within this very agenda. I think the reason that I can be supportive and I'm interested in that second resolve clause being a topic of discussion on the Human Rights Commission, intentionally a topic on the Human Rights Commission, is that we have seen some really interesting challenges in our procurement policies in the last 8 months or so. We have, if you look at our A20 plan, we have DTE listed as a collaborator 15 times, and DTE is a company like Blue Cross Blue Shield that has been identified as problematic. I think I sit on the insurance board. I understand that the Blue Cross Blue Shield contract is like a lot of contracts where the city is too big for some providers and too small for other providers. And I appreciate Mr. Mahoney's position that, we have to get these services from somewhere. But in situations where we have a choice, my anxiety is that, as we've seen before in a couple of places, there are opportunities for our procurement policies to look fairly arbitrary. And I am always in favor of promoting more public discussion, more engagement of more people in topics that are sticky like this. The Human Rights Commission is exactly the place where the folks on that commission are tasked with the topics that are encompassed in this issue. They are regularly collaborating with our legal department around policies and reforms that they send to council. So I appreciate that, yes, there are technically council liaisons that go to HRC and could mention it to them. But I think that we're making a pretty serious statement about if we believe that this should be incorporated in the procurement policies, if we see this as an opportunity to promote the values of democracy and inclusion and all of those really big things. Big things like that, we want to talk about at the Human Rights Commission. This is absolutely in their wheelhouse. I don't want to see this fly under the radar in a memo from the city administrator. What the second resolve clause says now is that the city administrator must report to council. That can look like anything. That can look like something buried on one of our agendas. I would hope that the advocates in this room would be supportive of a robust public discussion at one of our public boards. It is stronger for our procurement policies to be discussed and analyzed at the Human Rights Commission. That's an improvement over what it looks like right now. So I will be supporting a referral of the second resolve clause to the Human Rights Commission.
Councilmember Briggs.
I will not be supporting a referral. I think, these commissions are advisory bodies to council, and I think I don't need the advice of the Human Rights Commission, though I certainly value their opinions, that this is important work to move forward tonight. We have had a very large coalition come to us that is working from across the state and ask us to move this forward. And the reality is we have 2 resolve clauses, the first of which, while important, is fairly performative in terms of calling out corporations to align their spending with their values. The second is work that calls upon us to consider how we might be able to shift our procurement policies or shift our internal processes to at least daylight the process a little bit better. So I want to get started on that. I think that I don't think, while I value the Human Rights Commission, I don't think that that's going to add value to this process right now.
Councilmember Iyer.
Thank you. I too will vote against this. I'm not going to support delaying this work by sending it to the Human Rights Commission. As Councilmember Grand mentioned, they can certainly discuss it, and I welcome them to join the conversation. But I guess I would point out that this, at least in my mind, this doesn't only apply to racial or social justice issues. I mean, this could also apply to environmental issues. And so, are we going to first send it to HRC and then send it to the Environment Commission? No. I want our city administrator and our attorney's office to get working on this right away. I think it's really important that we move on it. And I see this as just a delay tactic. So I will vote against it and support the motion as it originally was represented.
Councilmember Griswold.
Just to clarify, because I know I'm the oldest council member, but I do resent when people tell me what I'm thinking and what my motives are. My motive was not to delay it. My motive was to follow the accepted process that we have in place and to value the Human Rights Commission. If we don't want to do that, that's fine. I think this is very important, but we need to realize that. And it's very important to follow process because as a city, we often have unintended consequences. And we have enough money in this city to not do things properly the first way and simply pay to have it done the second time. And this is so important that I don't want to do that. In terms of environmental issues, we have been working with other governmental entities on a polluter pay, resolutions to support that. And I think that in this case, I don't want to delay the discussion tonight and add another resolve clause, but I would say for the activists here, it's very important that you build a statewide coalition to support the statements here today, because Ann Arbor cannot do it without the support of many, many other organizations, and there were lessons learned regarding polluter pay. Thank you.
Councilmember Nelson.
Hi, I'm going to be a little clearer because I realize that there's so many opportunities for misdirection. I would point out that the second resolve clause has absolutely no timeline. So the city administrator is going to consider and report, but we've put no date on that. And so what I meant in my earlier remarks was what that looks like, report to city council, that could mean anything. That could mean a footnote in a memo that is buried in an agenda, basically declaring this thing infeasible. And that would be the end of it. And so I heard the repeat of like delay. There's no timeline here. So the idea of sending it to Human Rights Commission as a method of delay, I have a question for the city administrator. The second resolve clause, could we add a timeline to that so that advocates and people in the public who are invested in this could look for what agenda a report would appear on? What would be your timeline in terms of having information to share with council on the feasibility of including this in procurement policies? Could we add a date to it?
You certainly could add a date to it, but I couldn't speak to a date this evening. I can't tell you sitting here how long it would take us to do it, but in terms of reporting back to you, given the nature of the discussion, we would certainly do a communication directly to council on the merits of the resolution. It wouldn't be buried anywhere. It would be transparent so everyone would see it. But I can't tell you how much time.
Okay, so sending it to the Human Rights Commission does not relate to a delay at all. I don't really need to debate this anymore because the point the point to me that is
Councilmember.
twisted is just about more public discussion of this. That's all. Thanks.
Councilmember Adina.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be relatively brief. As the other liaison to the Human Rights Commission, I don't think there is anything preventing, if we pass this tonight as is, preventing the Human Rights Commission, as others have pointed out, from having a robust discussion about this. I actually would encourage, I will bring it up to the leadership at the Human Rights Commission that this was brought up. I would actually encourage many of the activists in the room to continue to go that route as well, so that we can continue to have this conversation. But I want to be really clear about what the motion is, as I understand it, is to remove the second resolved clause and refer it to the Human Rights Commission. The second resolved clause reads that the city administrator be directed to consider and report to city council on the feasibility of including in the city's procurement policies an evaluation of whether a potential vendor's political activities are in furtherance of or in opposition to such vendor's self-professed values. Removing that from this resolution and referring it to the Human Rights Commission means we are not directing the city administrator to do that tonight. That absolutely delays this work from beginning. I also am very unclear on how that line itself is particularly relevant to the advice of the Human Rights Commission. This issue in general is absolutely, I think, relevant to the Human Rights Commission. We are talking about people's voting rights. We are talking about human rights. Asking the Human Rights Commission to weigh in on one line of this resolution regarding our procurement process does not particularly seem like a useful delay. That is what this is. The next Human Rights Commission meeting is not until November 9th. That is the first time they would potentially be able to bring this up. They already have an agenda that they will be continuing with. So we would not be directing the city administrator to move forward with anything tonight. So I will not support this referral. I think that we need to vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks. I won't speak to all this delay, not delay nonsense, because I've been trying to get Chapter 40 rules back from committee for like 2 years now. So delay is a part of our business, unfortunately. But, this is talking about political speech, okay? Right? Political speech. And so this notion that we're checking out vendors, we're checking their speech, they're checking your speech. So, that's a fine line, and that they give to politicians is very explicit in this resolution of what it is all about. And I was just talking to some friends who, and I'm pretty liberal, and who are way extraordinarily more so than me, and which is hard to believe, but they are. And they, even they're cynics about these vague guidelines that we come up with. And it's not far from checking on a vendor's values. You're like, check? You're going to check? Yeah, make sure the check's signed. Make sure you sign the check to donate to me because I'm going to, it's like this is walking a fine line when we're talking about adjusting corporate speech for city contracts, the very same contracts that we vote on. So I think there's plenty of opportunity for, vague corruption to creep into our procurement process, and so does the Department of Justice, because among their other guidelines of what must be avoided is making unreasonable requirements in order to qualify for competitive bids, and also any arbitrary action in the procurement process. And if you read this resolution, you see that it's very open to our arbitrary actions. And so, let's have human rights here. I don't really see it as a delay. Then that's not the point anyway. It's trying to be made a point, but it's not a point. Just like calling politicians whose advice and views you don't believe with, agree with. Dangerous or extremist or whatever. That's Dem Party talking points, and you've all seen the flyers in your mailbox. So we don't need that at our table. So let's refer this. Why not?
Further discussion of the referral. Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
No.
Councilmember Graham?
No.
Councilmember Redina?
No.
Mayor Taylor?
No.
Councilmember Iyer?
No.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs?
No.
Councilmember Malawi, absent. Councilmember Hayner?
Yes.
Councilmember Dish?
No.
Motion fails.
I'm sorry, I referred to that as the referral when it was an amendment and a referral. Was anyone unclear about that? I'm going to deem that to be not unclear. Further discussion of the main motion. For my part, I would like to very much thank the Defend Black Voters Coalition for daylighting this issue for me back when we first communicated with respect to Blue Cross, and then for further suggesting and working with me in engaging the text of this resolution. We live in an era in which corporations have become overt political actors. They engage with value statements in the public space, and they engage with support, direct support for candidates and elected officials. Many corporations, I think we should all be pleased to say, have indeed made forceful expressions regarding structural racism and the preservation of democracy. And these issues, these statements, truly ought to be, nonpartisan, bipartisan, unipartisan. They are American. The promotion of democracy, the fight against white supremacy, these are things upon which we all ought to be able to agree. When organizations act in a manner that is consistent with their values, when people act in a manner consistent with their values, it builds trust and it engenders confidence. When organizations and when people act in a manner that is not consistent with their stated values, it breaks trust and it breaks confidence. For my part, I value working with persons that build trust, that build confidence when they say that they'll support democracy, when they say they'll work to fight structural racism, that they do it and they do it when it counts. Here, as we've been talking about this evening, we are in a political environment, we're in a cultural environment when corporations are having it both ways, when corporations are making statements in support of democracy, against structural racism, but are acting in a manner that is inconsistent with those values. And frankly, that's just not right. And I believe that we have limited voice here at City Council, but aggregated with perhaps the councils elsewhere and the work that can be done outside the city, we can be powerful. We can exhort corporations to exert their influence on legislators and candidates to fight racism and to support democracy. And when we also, too, as actors in the marketplace, we have an opportunity to consider how it is that we do what we do. We have an obligation to our residents. We have an obligation to our employees. We are primarily service providers, but we are also actors in the market. And we have an opportunity to reflect upon how we do business and, frankly, to report out how we do business. That is what the purpose of this resolution is. When it is brought, that's the purpose of this resolution. I think it's a step forward for transparency with our vendors and, frankly, transparency with ourselves. And I'm glad that we're doing it, and I hope that it'll bear fruit. Further discussion on the main motion? Councilmember Nelson.
I would like to offer an amendment to the second resolve clause, and I would just like to add a date. Because there is no date, and without a date, there is people, I understand that things are not explicitly hidden, but our agendas are long and they are full of attachments. I would like to put a date on this so that activists who have worked really hard on this statement and actually believe in this can get word back and know when to look. Even if the report, Mr. Mahoney, is just, we're still working on it, can we put a date? Report to council by January, like the first meeting in January 2023, or earlier.
I will try to do whatever council directs me to do. It's hard for me sitting here tonight, given what we're talking about, having not done anything on it, to just say, yeah, I know we'll be done by that time. So I'll try to cooperate with whatever date you put in it. If we're not finished, we would certainly apprise you that we're not. It's difficult given, we're, a month from Thanksgiving, and then we get into December when a lot of us won't be around the whole month. I will try to comply with whatever date you give me. I don't have any objection to it, if you're asking me that.
All right. How many meetings are there in January? Hey, are there 2 meetings? Could I say the second meeting in January? What? What?
Perhaps council requests an interim or final report no later than the second meeting in January.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was substantive. Thank you.
Mr. Mahoney, council requests an interim or final report, which gives you freedom to do both, no later than the second meeting in January 2023.
I will comply with it. Thank you.
May we deem that your amendment, Councilmember Nelson?
That would be fine, yes.
Seconded by Councilmember Redina. Is that friendly to the body? Further discussion, rather, it is friendly. I view it as friendly.
Okay.
I observe it as friendly to the body. Further discussion, the main motion is amended. Sorry, Councilmember Redina.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think we're hopefully winding down on this if for no reason other than we're running out of opportunities to speak up here. But I just wanted to take an opportunity, as somebody who has been on the other side of this, I know that it can be frustrating to sit in the room and come with what I think is a relatively clear message, an important message, and to have us have a really prolonged process, conversation, and argument. And so I wanted to just take an opportunity to kind of recenter the message as there's a sign facing me that I know that folks at home can't see, but just to say that and acknowledge that Black voters matter. That is why we are here and having this conversation. Councilmember Briggs asked me to remind folks that Defend Black Voters Coalition is a statewide coalition, and so this action does not need to just happen here in Ann Arbor, but it can continue in communities all around the state. And so get involved if this is something that is of importance to you. And just wanted to, again, thank all of you for being here, for your patience through this conversation. And hopefully we're going to pass this and start looking forward towards making some meaningful change. Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Song.
If I can just extend Councilmember Redina's comments a little bit, and noting not only is this group a statewide coalition, but also part of a nationwide coalition of the National Unity 2022 Black Voting Empowered Building Campaign, so Unity 22, and that includes organizations such as the NAACP, the National Urban League, National Action Network, Emily's List, and Building Back Together. So we are not alone, and I'd love to see us set an example for the rest of the country, so thank you.
Further discussion? Councilman Griswold, I believe you've spoken twice in the main motion.
I thought it was on the amendment. I just want to thank everyone who's here this evening. I will be voting for it now that I understand that the resolution came from the activist organization.
Further discussion? Roll call vote, please, starting with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
Yes.
Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Redina?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Iyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Malawi? Absent. Councilmember Hayner?
Nope.
Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ms. Cord, we have a closed session today.
Yes, Mayor Taylor, I am requesting a closed session to discuss pending litigation under MCL 15.628E. The case name is Raziel Alvarez Rodriguez versus James Robert Boylan and the City of Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County Circuit Court, case number 21-001280-NI. Thank you.
We have a motion, please, to go into closed session on that basis. Moved by Councilmember Hayner, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion? Councilmember Hayner.
Thank you. With the Open Meetings Act, I would like to add that I would to have a conversation in closed session I'm trying to get the language proper to comply with OMA, of consulting with our attorney about other matters before this body. It's number 2. It requires 2/3 of a vote of the body. I want to add a topic for closed session that
Councilmember
belongs in closed session.
Could you just tell me the topic? Because if there is no pending case or...
Procurement procedures. It doesn't have to be a pending case.
No, but there has to be a legal advice memo to be discussed. And I don't believe we have provided a legal advice memo on procurement procedures.
Well, that's a shame, and I was going to ask you for one because we need one.
Okay?
So that's why I want to go in closed session, but if you want to have the conversation out here, we can too, after closed session. Either way, I'll go in for what you're asking, but I'm just trying to add a second topic. This is my only opportunity to do that.
If you are requesting for a legal advice memo, I am more than happy to contact you about the precise question you're asking and provide one in time for the next meeting, if you would like.
No, I'd prefer a conversation of the body, but I can accept that also.
Okay, because I'm just trying to advise that I think we have to have a basis to go into closed session.
All right, well, my reading of OMA is that number 2 is allowed with a 2/3 vote of the body, which is any advice from our attorney.
Roll call vote, please, to go into closed session on the basis articulated by the city attorney. Or pardon me, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please, on going to closed session on the basis articulated by the city attorney. Roll call vote, please, start with Councilmember Griswold.
Councilmember Griswold?
Absent.
Absent. Councilmember Song?
Yes.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes.
Councilmember Ardina?
Yes.
Mayor Taylor?
Yes.
Councilmember Iyer?
Yes.
Councilmember Nelson?
Yes.
Councilmember Briggs?
Yes.
Councilmember Maui, absent. Councilmember Hayner?
No.
Councilmember Dish?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are in closed session. Open session. We have before us the clerk's report of communications, petitions, and referrals. May I have a motion, please, to approve the clerk's report? Moved by Councilmember Medina, seconded by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The clerk's report is approved. Do we have any communications today from our city attorney?
No, we do not. Thank you.
Thank you. We now come to public comment general time. Public comment general time is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to council and the community about matters of municipal interest. To speak at public comment general time, one need not have signed up in advance. Speakers will have 3 minutes in which to speak, so please pay close attention to the time. Our clerk will notify you when 30 seconds are remaining and when your time has expired. When your time has expired, please conclude your remarks and cede the floor. Is there anyone who would like to speak at public comment?
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Lipson. I'm a resident of Ann Arbor for 50 years, and I'm running as an independent, as you know, for mayor of Ann Arbor. I'm here today to comment mostly on TC1, but I did want to discuss the issue that I heard discussed here between the several council members about curtailing public comment at the end of the meeting. If that is true, and there seemed to be some discussion that it wasn't actually what you were contemplating, I would say that it is unnecessary and it is curtailing of the exact reason for having public comment, which is to be able to comment on the actions of council at the end of the meeting. It's not as if there's a giant lineup here that's going to take a lot of your time to hear that, to endure the comments of the public. So I would hope that you're not going to do that because, in fact, that is another form of suppression. You're concerned about voter suppression, but by curtailing public comment, that is suppressing the First Amendment rights of members of the public to speak truth to power. On the issue of TC1, I just want to say briefly that I was disappointed that when all of the comments that were made at the public hearing on TC1 for the stadium area, the West Stadium Boulevard area, were completely ignored by the Planning Commission and then by this council. It just was emblematic of the way that the council goes about its business with a very high-handed and exclusive attitude. You guys know best. The public doesn't have a clue, and you're just going to go ahead no matter what and entertain the TC1 exactly as it was for Stadium, or I should say for State Street and Eisenhower, even though the two areas are completely different. And the planning department, the staff person on the planning department, actually came up with some very good suggestions that would have given credence to the public's comments and would have acknowledged them. Instead, they were completely shut down, and we just went ahead and approved that without any changes. So I would say that first of all, what's most important is not to make all of these changes right away, not to pass the next TC1, but to wait until the next comprehensive plan is completed so that people have a chance to have input in what the shape of our city will be, the future shape, the height, and the density, rather than just go ahead right now before that happens and put the cart before the horse. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Boudry, is there anyone online waiting to speak to us?
Mayor, I don't have any callers online with their hands up.
Seeing no one, public comment is closed. May I have a motion to adjourn? I'm sorry, is there communications today from council? Councilmember Griswold.
I just want to announce that early in 2023, a citizens group will start a petition drive to put the decision of nonpartisan elections before the voters. So it's important that we let the voters decide if they want November to be the key date for when we elect city officials, like all but 2 other cities in the state of Michigan do. Thank you.
Further communication, Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks. Just a real brief little tale of what my job, my day is like. So I try and avoid those big box stores for the reasons that were kind of iterated here at the table. You see they all sponsor NASCAR, a lot of military kind of overtones and that kind of thing with NASCAR and NFL. And you can go look up how people give, right? So I try and shop local. And we used to go to Fingerly, but that's gone so sadly. So now it's Chelsea Lumber or Stadium Hardware or Anderson Paint and places like that. It's, as local as you can get. And so anyway, long story short, I was out at Miller Maple Dexter intersection area and I see the green paint starting to go down. And so you might recall, I don't know, like a month ago now, we approved a contract that had some split funding for new bike lanes and new paint lanes out there. And, there was some of that partially was ARPA funding, the COVID relief funding. And I didn't support that because it's green paint going down and that was supposed to help folks who are most affected by COVID. But I saw it, and I said, oh, they're striping it, and maybe people will use it, whatever. And so I just wanted to tell the community, like, if you were affected by COVID, if you lost family and friends, or if you lost wages or your job or your housing, if you were a senior and you felt isolated for 2 years, or if COVID affected your mental health or some way, just go get on your bike and go look at that green paint and realize how deeply the city cares about you. Thank you.
Further, Councilmember Song.
I had the pleasure of meeting Vice President Harris over the weekend and having a quick conversation on the importance that the state's elections are for our country. Democrats up and down the ballot are fighting. We are the line between democracy and chaos. And I'm really, really proud of our city and our county for having candidates and elected officials who see that line and are working really hard on getting out the vote. Past midterm elections, we've had 28% voter turnout in our county. For a city full of high overachievers, I'd love to see that. I'd love us to see us surpass that. I'd love us to unite and assist the Democrats who are on the doors every single day. I see many of us who are supporting this endeavor, and I'm really, really proud that our city and our county can stand up when it really counts and where our nation is watching us come out and vote. Thanks.
Further communication. We have a motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councilmember Rodino, second by Councilmember Briggs. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.